Welcome back to the podcast, guys. Today we are joined by Noam Maital, who is the CEO of Darwin AI. Welcome, Noam. Maybe you can start by telling us just a bit about what you guys do and who you usually serve as a customer.
Thanks, Jordan. Happy to be with you here. Darwin is working with state and local public entities that are starting to think about how they adopt generative AI. And one of their primary concerns around scaling these solutions is how do they do so safely, securely, ethically, in a way that matches what their constituents and their public is expecting of them and what we expect as residents. And one of the main challenges for them is to build what's called the governance and guardrails around AI usage. This essentially means what are the rules around how you use the various AI tools out there, whether it's personal information, whether it's the systems itself, and whether they're authorized or not. Think of like DeepSeek from China may not be authorized in the US or things like that, all the way to enabling actual use case analysis for these agencies to be able to further invest in their AI strategy within their organization.
Awesome. And it makes a lot of sense. I think there's a lot of perceived danger around AI. Somebody talked about it like it being a flying car, which sounds really amazing, but everyone is really scared of it. Like ask them to put your children inside the flying car and they'll say, no way. How did you originally sort of come up with the concept for Darwin? Was it a market that you were a part of and you saw a solution, or you just saw a gap? Like, tell us about that.
Before Darwin, I co-founded and was the CEO of a startup called Waycare, which built in the early days of deep learning and machine learning, AI-based traffic management. Fast forward, sold the company a few years ago and promised my wife some time off the roller coasters, joined venture capital as an investor. And in that role as an early stage investor, what I started seeing is every company pitching me generative AI transforming their vertical, whether it's banking, healthcare, you name it. The only vertical that was missing from there was the public sector and government. And that was really curious to me, because if you remove a lot of the buzz around generative AI and just really think at the core of what we use today, it's for repetitive, bureaucratic, text-rich processes. And if we were playing charades and I'd ask you, which vertical did I describe right now, you'd likely say government. There's a match between the problem and technology, and yet they're not coming together. And that thread is the thread I pulled on in terms of questioning why hasn't this problem been solved yet, which led me to understand really that the adoption model within government is completely flipped to the private sector, where de-risking and structuring the governance is primary to scaling and adoption in government. Whereas in the private sector, it's more free market enterprise of trial and error, and the best rises to the top through that process. And that led me to understanding that there needs to be a different technological model and solution built for the government agencies. And that was the impetus for Darwin.
It makes so much sense when you say it like that. It almost sounds as Elon Musk talks about the space sector and how he tried to come in and revolutionize it, and it was old and boring and tons of risk, and he wanted to sort of, quote, privatize it and flip the model. Do you see that you're kind of doing the same thing with AI and bringing it into the government sector?
Well, I think a better way to look at it is there's a few moments in time throughout the history of the last few decades where there's real transformative technology. Not to pick on blockchain, but blockchain had very meaningful change agents in a lot of industries. It almost completely passed on local governments. They don't really engage with it. Versus cloud. Cloud is everywhere. When internet and dot-com bubble, everyone was adopting it. We're in the same moment now with generative AI. And so that transformation is going to unlock everything in terms of how government provides services. And it offers us as residents one of the best opportunities of actually improving what we think of government, because it's not a one-to-one equation the way we know it of if you add more tax dollars, you get more people to give you better service of government. AI, you could build agents and replicate at a much more lower fractional cost and deliver better, faster service that are automated. And that's really, I think, the transformation that we're on the cusp of in the next few years, that a lot of these government agencies are going to start undertaking as they adopt and scale AI.
Yeah. Now that you lay it out, it makes so much sense. What do you think some of the biggest challenges you've faced in building Darwin have been over the last year or so?
Well, it's not my first rodeo in government. And I think always within government, one of the challenges is to understand how it operates and the nuances of how to, quote, sell to government agencies. Specifically, counterintuitively, or maybe something we don't think about, is that in the private sector, we often, well, not often, all of us are running on dollars as the currency of value of what we sell. Something that's highly valuable, we're going to pay a high price for a high dollar amount. In government, public opinion is the currency that reigns supreme.
Yeah.
Your value of your product is going to be based on how much is it perceived to improve public opinion and actual services to your community, or do you save or protect something? That shift in the mind, it's a bit amorphic, but when you need to translate that from your product and private sector and venture capital world, translate all of your messaging to be much more oriented to how you're serving a community, how this helps the elected official better hit his targets, strategic targets that he set in his candidacy, and be very mindful of those alignments to his or her own political strategy around that as well.
We're what are 8 minutes in, and I'm already learning so much. I've never thought about it like that. The currency of the government sector is public opinion. It's brilliant. I'm definitely going to
Well,
clip that. I love it.
if you think about it, um, is they're saying, right? There are two things that are forever stable: taxes and death, right? And so there's a reason for the way government thinks is generally budgets may move right or left, but overall tax collection in a Western country will stay more or less the same. They don't really have to think about it like a business that maybe next year their revenue will go away or that it will grow by 50%. Most of the time, they're really thinking about how do they do a better job with pretty much the same amount of money or slightly less, slightly more. And that shifts the whole value set of how a government entity operates.
Got it. You mentioned that you're working on bringing AI to governments and how that all works. Like what sorts of things are you noticing that these government sectors are using AI to automate, or what are the biggest gaps that are being filled there?
There's two parts to this answers to this question. The first part is it's already being used and prevalent across the board. We're seeing, upwards of 70, 80% usage on a weekly basis across employees across cities that are using some form of AI tool, whether it's ChatGPT or Copilot. And a lot of them are using it with their personal accounts. So it's what's called shadow AI. And that's a problem on the risk side. But secondary to that, a lot of our customers are now coming to us and saying, can you help us develop use cases and workflow, automate workflows that are currently manual? And that's where we're starting to get to what's called agentic AI, which
Hmm.
is automating various small tasks and workforce in an agentic manner and delivering that to the departments that we're working with. So whether that's purchasing department or marketing department or finance, each one of them have tedious, laborious, repetitive tasks throughout their day that today are manual. And software as a whole doesn't fully compensate for that because it's much more wider and specific on the use case. And that's where they come to us looking for agentic AI to help build very specific workflows that are narrow, but yet address pain points that are sucking up a lot of their time in their day.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. How are you going about acquiring some of these customers? If they're government sectors and stuff like that, you can't just kind of hit them with a
Yeah.
Facebook ad.
No, it doesn't work that way. It's a lot about thought leadership, partnership, right? Showing value. So I'll give you a few examples. One thing we did is we launched a free policy wizard tool that I recommend to any agency listening in to go and try it out. And what that is essentially for any agency that wants to start developing an AI policy, which is their starting point, they can go into our tool and very quickly and freely create their own AI policy. What that does is gives them a resource, right, to start thinking about how they're governing their risk around AI. The second element here is around understanding the driver of our customer, which is typically going to be an IT department within a public entity organization, whether it's a city or education board or utility. And what we'll do there is understand whether they sit on the side of risk avoidance first or on the innovation side. And they may be somewhere along that range. And what I mean by that is on the risk side, they'll be taking a posture, a security posture of first protecting and governing their environment before adopting any AI, making sure nothing comes in they don't want or managing user behavior. And the second posture, which is around innovation, is how do I unleash scale and innovation across my organization of various AI tools that are right now in pilot or shadow AI mode, what's called. And what we do is give them a centralized platform that they can now structure, secure, and securely scale that We based on that messaging and understanding of the personnel within that organization will message appropriately to those different audiences.
And have you done any sort of outreach to these organizations, or are they pretty hard to get into with those methods?
Well, they're hard to get into with cold emails or cold calls, things like that. It's a very close knit group in some ways, and they're highly suspicious of private sector because they get bombarded with vendors from the outside trying to sell them
Okay,
stuff. Usually, what's really helpful is conferences, having some assets in place that you can hand over to them as valuable. Good example is the policy wizard, something that adds to their day to day and brings them knowledge or information as a conversation starter. And that conversation isn't like, come buy Darwin. It's, let's talk about your AI adoption strategy. Help me understand it. Let me share with you some insights from our customers. And through
sure.
that conversation, understanding whether there's a match on the work that we do and the services that we provide, and closing the loop from there.
Got it. All right, Noam, if we come back to Darwin, then like what are some of the big roadmap items or goals that you guys have got this year?
For starters, we have quite a lot of launches with new customers, and continuing to work with our existing customers. AI is moving really fast. So, part of what we're doing for the first time is helping them be fully compliant and secure across their AI environment, exposing AI systems that they're not aware of, building an AI inventory, closing the loop on the entire workflow of what's called incident management, which is the risk framework. Secondary to that is towards the next quarter and so on, working with agencies that we're already talking with around helping them build these agentic workflows across the departments and use cases once we've secured their environment with our what's called Darwin Govern solution, which is the centralized guardrails. Customer expansion, a lot of R&D development that's happening simultaneously, which is kind of part of the fun of startup in this early stage.
Finally, a question I really like to ask is, let's say that you could wave a big magic wand and you could solve a big problem. I'm sure if you looked over the government sector, you could solve many problems there with the magic wand. But if there was something within Darwin that you could wave this magic wand over and solve that problem like that, what would that big problem be right now?
I guess the answer to that right now, because there's many big problems in government, that's not going to surprise people.
Yeah.
But the starting point that we really focus on, and I think it's the biggest problem, is unlocking scale, AI adoption at scale, meaning full fleshed enterprise solutions across an organization in a manner that they feel secure and safe across any vertical within their government. HR, finance, police, whatever it may be, let them go loose, quote unquote, in terms of using these technologies, but still being secured and knowing that their environment is operating in the manner that they need to as a government entity. If we solve that problem, that's the key to unlocking rapid adoption within the public sector of generative AI.
That makes sense. Awesome. And listen, if people are watching and maybe they want to check out Darwin for themselves, or they want to get this policy wizard, where can they go? Maybe how can they even connect with you?
I think darwingov.com, that'd be a great way to connect and look at what we're doing and understand more. In terms of the policy wizard, also just go policy.darwingov.com and you'll immediately be able to kind of create your own policy if you're an organization, even private entity for that matter. And happy to engage anyone that's kind of thinking about public sector, building companies in that space, or managing an organization within the public sector as well.
Perfect. I'll make sure to leave links to all those things in the description. But thank you so much for your time today, Nom, and thank you guys very much for watching. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, Jordan.